fine. Yep, go for it.
Okay, right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for your time, and a very pertinent time for an FEA briefing on Brexit. And we're delighted to have with us Terry Boniface from BEIS. Terry is the Assistant Director for the Electronics and Machinery sector, and we've a long established relationship with Terry and his team as the FEA, and Terry's attended exhibitions and met many of you on the call this morning, I know, looking at the list, and also through our interface with URIS, which is the EU Relationship and Industrial Strategy Task Force, which comprises 13 engineering and machinery sector trade associations within its membership, and it's the representative body to give us that close engagement with government. And that close engagement has resulted in many of you getting real-time responses to your questions over Brexit. But as far as the last piece of research we did of the membership, whilst COVID was certainly up there as you'd expect in being the key issue that was being faced, very close behind that was the uncertainty behind Brexit. And our representation over the last couple of years has been to get as close as possible to the regulatory alignment with Europe, and this is what Terry's going to explain to us this morning. So without any further delay, I'll hand over to Terry, who's got a presentation to run through, and please list your questions by the side. Some of the content that Terry refers to in terms of the guidance to compliance with CE marking and UKCA is being distributed literally as we speak. So look out into your inbox for that. But without any delay, hand over to Terry. Thank you very much for joining us today, Terry, and look forward to seeing your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Keith said, I'm Terry Boniface from BEIS. I have got a presentation today. It's quite a well-timed event because yesterday government actually issued some advice on UKCA marking and its approach to introduction to UKCA and replacement for the CE, which will be circulated after this event here today. Before I start on the presentation, though, I'll say a couple of just higher level stuff about the progress and negotiations and BEIS's role. Although negotiations are actually being led by David Frost in his Task Force Europe team within government, the goods and the market issues as part of that negotiation are actually being run by BEIS. BEIS senior officials are actually involved in the FTA negotiations with the EU. We leave on things like regulations, CE marking, standards, rules of origin are all BEIS core issues, which we're actually leading on. Also, alongside HMRC, BEIS are central to the border delivery group, which is looking to try to identify ways to ease the borders once we actually leave at the end of the transition period. So we're heavily involved in that agenda. I think you're all aware, I guess, from the newspapers and the progress on EU negotiations so far. EU negotiations obviously based on the withdrawal agreements. They're based on the political declaration, which was issued at the same time. The UK has also published its own approach to EU negotiations. I think it's also possible, it's probably right to say that we're actually just looking for an FTA leaving the customs union now. The deal we're trying to strike is very different to the deal that Theresa May was actually trying to push through some time ago. So it's a very different type of relationship we're looking for. But what we are looking for is a relationship based on precedents from existing EU FTAs, particularly Japan and Canada, which are probably the most ambitious FTAs that have been struck by the EU to date. So nothing we're really asking for is out with what's actually in those agreements. But I think, as you're aware, I think some of the issues in there have been issues that the EU aren't willing to concede on at the moment. But certainly we're looking for a deal that has zero tariffs. We're looking for a deal that has bilateral accumulation on rules of origin, so therefore there's no distinguishing between EU and UK type input into products. We're looking for a full mutual recognition agreement on conformity assessment, And certainly on business movement, we're looking for something very much in line with the Canada-CETA deal, which allows business movement, particularly I think for electronics and machinery, around the area of servitization of capital sales. So if you're selling a good, getting a maintenance guy out there to actually do some installations like initial work or breakdown work. We're looking for a deal very similar to the CETA deal, which is quite good in that. And also what we're calling Mode 4, which is an agreement in usual trade deals to allow sort of like additional contracts to actually service and maintain the equipment. So all that is part of our ask. But again, I think you'll probably be aware there's only really two key issues which are actually stopping the trade deal at the moment. Underneath those, the general discussions around, technical discussions around goods and products have actually been going reasonably well. There's a lot of agreement, despite what we said in the papers, between ourselves and the EU. We all know we're stuck on two things. One of which is fish, which is really for definite deal with not BEIS. And the other thing is around state aid. Now, the state aid issue is really down to interpretations, I should say, different interpretations of what was actually written in the political declaration. In the political declaration, we essentially have words agreed between ourselves and the EU saying that we'd uphold the current standards on state aid. We're interpreting that and saying we'll have our own subsidy regime in line with WTO subsidy regimes, which is broadly equivalent to the EU state aid rules. And the EU are saying, well, what we actually meant by that statement was you will follow EU state aid rules. So there's actually an issue there. I think it may be resolvable, but I don't think that's intrinsic. I think both sides are actually looking for ways to actually strike a deal. But as I say, hopefully that's actually going somewhere. But after saying that, I think I'll move on to the presentation and just in case of time. As I say, there was actually something that was actually posted up yesterday on government websites, which is actually showing this, and hopefully you'll be able to see the screen. I'm going to try to share with you now. Right, can you guys see that okay? Yep, that's up, fantastic. Right, yesterday, I mean, we have been looking at ways, I mean, and our ministers in BEIS have been very positive about trying to find ways to actually try and find some type of soft landing measures for when we introduce the UKCA mark, which is the replacement for the CE on the UK market. Now, I think there's a yin and a yang with all these sort of things. You know, anytime we announce soft landing measures, it's actually giving away negotiation capital with the EU. Over what they're actually willing to actually give us in other parts of the agenda. But certainly yesterday, we know that from 1st of January, the essential standards and requirements for putting stuff on the UK market and the EU market will be essentially the same. We've actually taken those EU regulations onto the UK statute book. You know, the standards are still BS standards. So the actual standards are the same. While we're encouraging people to try to use the UKCA mark for goods on the UK market as of 1st of January this year, we have had so many submissions from sectors, including from Keith, very strong submissions from Keith, saying that we actually really need to actually give companies more time to adjust to the introduction of the UKCA mark. You know, I'm quite pleased BEIS ministers have actually listened to that and listened to the sort of like representations that are being made. And now we're saying that CE mark goods will still be accepted as a part of a transition period up until the 1st January 2022 now. So although we'll be starting to introduce UKCA from January, you can still put CE mark goods onto the UK market until January 2022. So it's a whole year and the rest of this year, another 3 or 4 months to actually make those changes in your procedures. There are a couple of exceptions to that. As part of the negotiation with the EU haven't been willing to accept UK conformity assessment bodies as being able to actually issue CE markings post us leaving, post the transition period. So if we're having UK bodies can't actually no longer approve CE mark. UK conformity assessed bodies can no longer approve the CE mark. So if you've actually got a product which you're not self-certifying, it's actually going to UK conformity assessment body. and that conformance assessment body is actually given a CE mark, and that will have to be transferred to a UKCA mark to be put onto the UK market as of the 1st of January. There's no soft landing measure we can introduce around that, because as I say, the rights are being taken away from UK conformity assessment bodies over CE. But as I said earlier, if you are self-certifying, and I suspect the majority of you guys will be self-certifying in your sector, you can continue self-certifying with the CE mark up until 2022 now, even for goods that are manufactured after January 2021. The other issue that's been was agreed yesterday, and which is point 6 there, is about where we actually put in the UKCA mark. So although we've got a year we can put the CE, even when the UKCA mark comes on, for most goods we're saying that the UKCA mark won't necessarily have to go on the product. There's another additional soft landing for additional period where it can be affixed to the product, maybe with a sticky label or in an accompanying document. So that's the 2 measures there that have been introduced to try to ease the introduction of UKCA. Now, I think from government's point of view, what we don't want to do, obviously, is to have this 12 months or 24 months soft landing period, and then nothing happen for 12 or 24 months, and then people will start panicking again at the end of that period. So the pressure will be still on to actually keep the pressure on, come to say, look, you should be actually looking now to try and change over the UKCA and bid that process in as quickly as possible. You know, we're not saying this should be something you should actually wait and wait and wait. The EU negotiations may impact on the fringes of this, but it's not going to impact on the introduction of the UKCA on the UK market. Negotiation with the EU may impact on the recognition of UK conformity assessment bodies for actually giving out the CE mark when you're actually exporting stuff into the EU market, but the UKCA will be introduced. There's the negotiations won't make any difference to that whatsoever. Just some general things. Obviously, you can put UKCA and CE on the same good. You know, because I think, as I say, from day one, the regulations will be exactly the same. You know, we're bringing those regulations, as I say, onto UK statute book. So although, you know, there'll be EU regulations and EU regulations, they'll be exactly the same. The standards will be exactly the same. So therefore, you should be out on most products from day one, put UKCA and CE dual labelled onto products, as long as they don't diversify it. And if they do diversify, you may still have a product that meets both criteria. You will need to draw up a UK declaration of conformity when you start using the UKCA. The declaration of conformity is really saying, at the moment for CE, is really saying that you're abiding by CE rules. So you're obviously going to have a totally separate document needed if you're abiding by, to say you're actually meeting UKCA UK rules as we go forward. Now, I'd say, let's move on a bit actually. Yeah, the status of the UK notified bodies, again, the paper that came out yesterday, which Keith will circulate, will actually just say how UK conformity assessment bodies are being changed. Now, I would say that UK conformity assessment bodies have been incredibly useful to BEIS during the course of all that planning for potential no-deal Brexit and whatever's happened over the last year and a half. They've been really good at actually trying to talk to EU bodies to try and get agreements to actually sort of like swap certificates and move certificates on. They've been looking at re-establishing themselves within the EU zone and to see if they can actually keep that work, because I say it's worked to them. So I would certainly recommend everybody to talk firstly to their conformity assessment body if you're using a conformity assessment body, because I think their status will change. As we're saying here, the current UK conformity assessment bodies, which are current EU notified bodies, will then become UK approved bodies. So they have a totally separate status to the EU notified bodies. I'm saying here manufacturers may require separate UK and EU certificates from 1st of January. That's really on the basis of the export to the EU as much as anything. Because obviously you won't be able to export to the EU if you have a conformity assessment body in the UK. If you're using a UK conformity assessment body, they won't be recognised. And as I said here on 11, outside any MRA agreement, which we are trying to seek, after 2022, EU bodies won't be recognised in the UK either. If the EU aren't willing to recognise our bodies, we're not going to recognise their bodies. Is the bottom line on that. There's obviously some changes about. I mean, some impact many of your products. Distributors would actually have a very different status. Now, again, some of your guys may actually no longer be distributors for EU products. You'll become importers of EU products. So the importer's name will need to be on the goods coming in, and as the importer, you would need to take responsibility for actually producing technical documentation if you're actually challenged by UK authorities to do it. So you're going to have a responsible person inside the UK. The default is if you don't have to have an authorised representative, and the regulations say you don't have an authorised representative for the new effect directive you're working under, it automatically then becomes the importer, and you'll become the importer if you're a branch of a EU business. Again, as I said there, for 24 months after January, most CE mark goods and the address can go the same way as the UKCA can actually go on a accompanying document rather than directly on the product. So again, there's another soft landing measure there, which we're actually trying to introduce. I'm rattling through this quite quick, gentlemen, but as I say, the full detail is in the documents that will come around afterwards, which hopefully should give you a more deeper look at some of this stuff. Right, I mean, this is about placing goods in the EU market. As I said earlier, the EU won't be recognising our conformity assessment bodies after January 2021. Subject to any mutual recognition agreement we might strike between now and the end of the year. Voluntary testing isn't impacted, but if you're UK manufacturer putting stuff on the EU, you will need to, needing a conformity assessment body, then you will need to get an EU conformity assessment body. But again, if you haven't done that already, if it does apply to you, I would say talk to your UK conformity assessment body first. So say they have been doing great work trying to actually identify, joint and having agreements with EU bodies to actually transfer certificates if needs be. Again, where the legislation allows for self-declaration, it will continue to do so up to the end of the transition period. So the trouble I've got is the part of the bottom of my screen's lost by the placement of this. But, right, okay. So the manufacturer can fix CE mark and drop the EU declaration of conformity. This can be done even when you're not based in the EU. Essentially, we're putting ourselves in the same position that the Chinese have at the moment when they're selling goods to us. You know, even though they're not in the EU, they're sitting in China, they can actually affix a CE marking, do the self-assessment, draw up the declaration of conformity. It's exactly the same process. Right. Again, going the other way, UK-based authorised representatives also won't be recognised in the EU. So again, if you are requiring a authorised representative for your product, the same way that we would need somebody in the UK taking responsible for the technical file, the EU will also require somebody in the EU responsible for the technical file. Now again, if you're a branch of an EU manufacturer, that's not an issue because your EU manufacturer is obviously that authorised representative anyway. But if you're a UK manufacturer exporting to the EU, then you will need to consider whether you need an authorised representative within the EU. And again, that could actually be your EU distributor or the first landing point of your goods, the first person actually taking the goods in the EU. But again, you'll need to actually talk to your network to find out if that's appropriate for yourself and who's going to take that responsibility. So again, yeah, EU-based distributors of goods become importers. So again, if you're manufacturing and exporting to the EU, that EU importer will need to indicate, have names and addresses on the product, keep a copy of the declaration of conformity, and ensure that if EU comes knocking on their door, they can ensure somebody inside the EU can actually ensure delivery of technical documentation if required. Now, I know there's obviously many different types of schemes here, and I think I was talking to somebody this morning who was saying that really the manual that accompanies the product has a declaration of conformity with it, which again is a very sensible way of doing this, and there's no reason why that manual couldn't actually cover, let's say, 2 declarations of conformity covering the UK and EU market. So there's actually ways around this, but as I say, these are the top level regulations, and I know in practice, many of you guys will actually have systems you need to adapt in very different and various ways to actually meet these new rules. Just moving on to something, as I say, all that stuff is encapsulated in those documents that's going to be circulated afterwards, because that was actually a very recent announcement. When I first talked about what we're trying to do with the EU, I did say that we're actually trying to get some agreements on business travel, to more ambitious agreements on business travel based on the CETA mark. Now, a lot of that is around servitisation of capital sales, let's say of machinery. And there's also this mode 4 about sort of like if you have a separate contract to maintain kit and equipment that may not even be your own original manufacture, about whether there be mode 4 allowances between ourselves and the EU to allow that to happen. So that's what we're actually trying to aim for. So no, that's actually been landed at the moment. So currently, there will be changes to actually providing service and travelling into the EU after the end of the transition period. Cross-border services won't actually be covered by the EU Services Directive. EU professional qualification recognitions will apply. That's essentially what the EU do to non-EU members at the moment. If you've got somebody coming in from a third country, they'll look up for equivalents of qualifications to actually come in and work. UK business providing service to an EU-based subsidiary, I mean, that their status will change. Essentially, they'll change the same status as, say, US company establishing in the EU that has at the moment. They'll be looked at as being as origin from a non-EU country. There will be slightly changes about what their rights and obligations are. Nothing that actually stops them setting up within the EU. So, say that happens all the time for non-EU businesses anyway. But there will be changes about what their requirements are and what their reporting requirements are and their authorisations will be. But again, a lot more of that information will be available if you search through the gov.uk websites. And if you can't find that, come to me and I'll make sure I can point you towards it through Keith. Not a problem, whatever. On the actual travel, what the EU have agreed is to this agreement for travelling without a visa for 90 days within each 180 days into the EU. We've also reciprocated on that, so EU nationals can obviously come here without a visa for up to 90 days within 180 days. Now, while they're here, obviously there's a limit of things they can do. The holidays, fantastic to study. The most important one to us is obviously the business meetings. So coming here for a sales or business meeting is perfectly acceptable without a visa. Coming here to actually work, do some engineering work, for example, may need a visa going forward. Now, it's quite fragmented. The way the EU approaches third parties, non-EU countries, members coming in to actually do this type of work at the moment actually comes down to each individual member state. So confusingly, I think we'll need to, if you're looking to actually need a visa for an actual work engagement, you'll need to actually look at the rules for each and every EU country, because they have never agreed what their rules will be. Some of them are more restrictive on what they're allowing. They actually allow some of them actually reserve rights to apply some economic market test when you're going into, let's say, to do a bit of servicing on machinery, which you weren't the original manufacturer of. But they're obviously, almost all of them are actually more agreeable to people going in to do servicing or maintenance work from the original manufacturer. But again, you'll need to look at each individual country. If you have main areas you're travelling to, France, Germany, Italy, then I think their rules are quite straightforward and quite easy to actually find out. But you will need to do that. Again, but I'll go back to what I said that's fun. I mean, these are really in a no-deal situation on business travel. you know, one of the things we are trying to get, and the EU is quite happy to actually talk about, is actually an agreement so we can do this, you know, as part of an EU FTA. The only problem we've got here is nothing's agreed to everything's agreed, and this won't be agreed unless the state aid and the fish stuff is actually sorted out at the same time. But that's unfortunately the world we're living in. I'll just say a couple of things about the border operating model, which is the other thing that Keith asked me to mention today. We did actually issue the border operating model about 6 weeks ago. Now, what's actually in the border operating model won't be any great surprise to anyone who's importing currently from outside the EU, or anyone that's currently exporting for areas outside the EU. Most of the process in there just saying that our process will actually be changed to that rest of world trade processes, as opposed to the EU trade where everything's fine and dandy and easy. So I say, I think people that experienced exporters or importers probably won't find a lot new in there. But what they are saying within the border operating model is there's several key things they're saying that people should actually be aware of. We all know about the GBEORI number that's been published quite widely by government about people only solely trading the EU need to make sure they have that registration. There are procedures listed in the border operating model for controlled goods. We are asking people that haven't already got duty deferment accounts to consider applying for duty deferment accounts, which might be quite important going forward. Paying an account of VAT and imported goods. Obviously, again, people are doing global trade are aware of the procedures for global trade there, and then they're no different. But people need to actually be aware that those applying to EU trade. Number 5 is an interesting one about international driving permits. There is a potential wrinkle to make sure that people have got international driving permits, because currently drivers don't need any particular driving permit to actually travel in the EU area, but we obviously be travelling into the EU area because we'll no longer be in it. But again, the details are within the border operating model. There are some facilitations. We're asking to check their suitability for facilitations are available. You will need to use community quantity codes. Again, nothing new to guys that are exporting globally. And using the global tariff tool. The UK has got its own tariff now, which is different to the EU tariff for global imports into the UK. It was originally based on the EU tariff rate, but it's actually alleviated a lot of tariffs and a lot of industrial goods coming into the UK now. So generally tariffs are much lower for bringing goods in from third-party countries into the UK than bringing into the EU and the old EU system. The wrinkle is, obviously, without an agreement with the EU, tariffs will apply to EU imports as well as being to global imports. Now, we're all hoping, again, we get the agreement with the EU. But if we don't, then they actually will have to pay some tariff. But as I say, the tariffs are much lower. I mean, a lot of tariffs have actually done away with completely under the global tariff rate. So I think a lot of industrial goods you'll find are 0 or certainly very low under the new UK tariff rate. Nice. I mean, I'll tell you, the other thing I'll say is that when I speak to a lot of SMEs and medium-sized businesses, quite often they're using freight forwarders to do a lot of this activity for them anyway. Now, again, there's got to be more hassle for freight forwarders. The freight forwarders are actually talking very well to BEIS, certainly to the FT. They've been actually acting as a source of advice to companies as well as what they actually do for them. There's more hassle for freight forwarders, and therefore the bill from the freight forwarder will go up. But we're certainly saying that for a lot of companies, their best option is to actually talk to their freight forwarder, apply a freight forwarder, or appoint an agent. HMRC have actually had some funds available, and I think they're still available now up until January next year, for companies who actually want to do additional training, take on additional staff, or put in additional IT systems to help deal with some of the additional complications for trade over the border. And those funds are still available for people who want to do this sort of stuff. But as I say, I think the default is really talk to the freight forwarder to get this stuff sorted. And as I say, they seem, at least talking to us, to be put on top of this stuff. And they seem to know what they're doing at the moment. Just to put that in a little bit more detail, traders bringing goods from to GB will need to declare their goods to customs. As I say, we're in a normal custom things. Must be declared in advance in customs to move for a roll-on, roll-off point. Non-controlled goods can declare the goods by making entry in their own records. Because I say we have got some soft landing approach, and one of those soft landings that we're just saying traders can keep their own records for 6 months and not actually pay. And obviously, any duties can be payable, can be deferred for 6 months. The trader can keep his own records and then total up at the end of that period. There are issues if controlled goods, and I don't think you're actually dealing with any controlled goods of actually coming through an area, without an automatic notification system. They have to manually entered into in the HMR systems by the trade the next working day. I'm not too sure if that applies to any of your guys. I mean, tell me if you're wrong. So we're not requiring trades to submit safety and security information for imports, or we're not requiring codes to submit summary declarations for safety and security as part of the soft landing measure. So this is the approach we're taking from January through to July 2021. So again, it's another soft landing measure. Again, it's all detailed within the border operating model. After July 2021, obviously things become a little bit heavier. You will need to make full custom declarations, or use simplified procedures if you've got a green HMRC to do that, and pay goods and tariffs at the point of entry of the good into the UK. You will require after July full safety and security declarations. There's two issues here for temporary storage models. There is a temporary storage model where for 90 days, where there is essentially space at the entry point or at the port or whatever. There's also a pre-lodgement model which has been introduced for those areas where there isn't actually storage capacity at the port. So if there's a pre-lodged model, you can actually pre-lodge the goods, still take it away, but that's on the HMRC record, so it actually just maintains flow at the ports areas. There is a plan to HMR to introduce new LT systems, which are detailed there as well. HMRC have also been through a huge recruitment process for border officers. I think they're planning to recruit another 3,000, I think, at one time. I think they might have come down. I think their forecasts are actually coming down now. But they're certainly in the process of actually doing that. And then lastly here, obviously the EU will be requiring us to make declaration requirements from January. There's no soft landing measures being mentioned by the EU at the moment. We'll have to assume at the moment there won't be soft landing measures, but when we're actually going through the no deal planning last year, the EU did say there'll be no soft landing, and then when push came to shove, they did actually introduce some measures that they were planning to do to actually alleviate strain to the borders. So I think they're going to have the same issue trying to manage cross-channel activity as we have. So certainly, as we're told at the moment, the EU is saying from January we will need to actually have export declarations for all goods going to the EU, either through the combined export declaration or exit summary declarations, arrived export declarations. You can pre-lodge activity using standard export procedures. Again, I'd suggest you all look at the border operating model to actually get the fuller detail on what these are. There are some duty spent stuff, and there are activities, as I say, in M5. If we have got infrastructure issues. Some of infrastructure you can actually automatically inform the HMRC when the goods are actually leaving the country, and some they don't. So some will actually be relying on manual and relying on the trader actually giving proof to HMRC that the goods actually left the UK and gone to the EU. That's a really quick run through, Keith, of a really complicated set of scenarios. I wasn't going to give anything more here at the moment, but is that enough for now, Keith? Are you happy just to maybe attempt some Q&A on that?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much for that, Terry. And just while Jocelyn collates any of the questions together, it's just to say thank you very much for that concise and clear presentation of what the requirements are going to be. I know certainly we very much welcome the soft landing approach, which shows pragmatism and thank you to you and the policy team, and please pass on our thanks to the ministers for that clarity of thought that's gone into the preparation of that guidance. Just before Justin puts a question out, one I've got, if I may, behind all this, do we think there'll be any changes to the market surveillance procedures, either in the GB or in the EU, because of what's going on over the next couple of years? How's it going to be enforced, do you feel?
Again, I think talking to the EU, I think they're as keen as we are. If we strike a deal, we do have sort of like some shared market surveillance activity. They're almost more concerned than we are. And processes and databases that the EU run. But I think because we're leaving the EU and we are trying to strike our own trade deals with the US and with whoever, and we have obviously got the issue around Northern Irish border, I think they're actually more concerned that about ensuring our market surveillance in the UK, as we are ensuring market surveillance of goods entering the EU and coming in that way. So I think they're quite happy to talk about that. As I say, but subject without a deal, then there will need to be very separate processes. And obviously we'll be setting up our own UK processes for market surveillance and our own databases. Things like, there are existing rights to actually request seizure of goods, I think, throughout the EU. Obviously that will disappear as a right. But as I say, we will actually be setting our own system, and regardless of whether we're getting an EU FTA, I think we're quite keen to actually have a system with the EU where we can share data on products in the market and market surveillance of product coming in, certainly from the countries I could mention, but I won't on this on this call. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Terry. And the feedback we're getting just through the chat is the time frames and the approach is right, workable, and acceptable. So thank you for that. The measured approach is being endorsed by many in the call. Jocelyn, can I pass across to you to ask any of the questions that we've had in, please?
Sure. So the first question is just for a bit of clarification. So you've touched on the answer to this a bit. It's related to CE and UKCA certificate. Where a company has a manufacturing base in the UK and a base in the EU, but manufacturing the same product, can we utilize the CE and UKCA certificate on the same product moving forward?
Yeah, I think the key thing is whether the product being manufactured in the UK and the EU meets both UKCA, so UK rules and standards, and it meets EU rules and standards. As I say, if there wasn't a UK facility and you were just manufacturing in the UK, and just manufacturing, I should say, in the EU, that EU company would actually be able to put if it's self-certifying, would actually be able to put the UKCA on it, as long as they can issue a declaration of conformity saying they're meeting UK rules and standards. And as they'll be identical on day one, that shouldn't be a problem. As long as they're identical in 6 or 9 months in, that is the problem. But yeah, there's not an issue there. Equally, the UK manufacturing base, if they're actually manufacturing goods that are going to the EU, they can, if they're able to self-certify, they can put the CE mark on there, as long as they have the declaration of conformity, saying it actually meets EU rules. What they will need to have is obviously 2 declarations of conformity. Yeah, so I mean, they'll need a declaration of conformity saying that product meets UK rules, and a declaration of conformity saying it meets CE rules. And as long as they've got that, they can both factories should be able to put UKCA and CE on.
Okay, great, thank you. On to the next question. We are a factory-owned company in the UK. The factory is in New Zealand. Will we be labeled as importers? Is the factory able to apply UKCI from New Zealand?
So sorry, is the company a distributor? Is that what it suggests?
The first line of the question is we're a factory-owned company in the UK. I'm not clear whether they're a distributor or not. It just says the factory.
It's a UK distributor business of a product manufactured in New Zealand, Terry.
Right, okay. Yeah. I mean, again, same way as the CE. I mean, a New Zealand company manufacturing in New Zealand can apply the UKCA mark on it, and the business in the EU will become the importer, and the business in the UK will have to hold or at least have access and take responsibility for the technical documentation, and their address will need to actually go on the imported product as being the importer into the UK. But yeah, there'd be no issue with the New Zealand company putting the UKCA mark on. I say as long if they can self-certify, and as long as they can actually get a declaration of conformity, which actually says it actually meets the UK requirements. So I mean, the procedure is essentially the same as the procedure for a non-EU company at the moment globally, self-certifying. You know, Chinese and American companies put the CE mark on, and they have a declaration of conformity saying they actually meet the CE mark, and they can actually do it themselves. You know, and they can put that CE mark on in China or in the US. Yeah, so it's no different for the UKCA.
Wow. Okay, great. The next question is, how will we be required to handle exports from the UK to the Republic of Ireland?
To the Republic of Ireland?
Yes.
Well, exports to the Republic of Ireland are export to the EU.
Okay.
To be honest. I thought you were going to ask me something really complicated about the UKNI mark.
That's a good question.
But yeah, the Republic of Ireland is no problem. I didn't actually mention the UKNI mark. Should I mention that?
Yes,
That awful
Yes.
problem. UKNI mark. Well, obviously, Northern Ireland is obviously going to stay aligning to EU regulation. So Northern Ireland will still be using the CE mark. So if you're self-certifying and sending goods to Northern Ireland, you use the CE mark. Yeah, there's no difference there. The UKNI mark only comes into play is if you're using a UK conformity assessment body. Yeah, if you're even using a EU conformity assessment body to send stuff to Northern Ireland, it's still just a CE mark. When we had the political declaration, the EU at that stage were already in their mind they weren't going to allow us to have mutual recognition. But because of the special issues with Northern Ireland, they were saying, look, it's inappropriate that we have part of the UK where even the UK conformity assessment body that might be based in Northern Ireland can't actually mark for its own territory. So they said, okay, so in the political declaration, the EU put in lines in there saying that a UK conformity assessment body can mark a good to go on to the Northern Ireland market, but it has to bear the UKNI mark. Now, again, I don't think it applied to touch with most of your guys' products. So I think they're all self-assessment. They're self-endorsed rather than use a conformity assessment body. But if you're self-assessing the product, you just put the CE mark on for Northern Ireland.
Okay, great. The next question. If we're delivering duty paid, can this be done through our UK deferment account, or will we need an EU deferment account equivalent?
That's one I can't actually answer, to be honest. But again, I'm happy to capture that and take that back to HMRC. And if you want to send me that question afterwards,
yes,
I'll see whether you need two duty deferment accounts. I must admit, my assumption is you will. But as I say, I'd like to take that away rather than give the wrong answer here. Fair
enough. Great, thanks. Yes, we'll pose that to you afterwards. The next question is regarding export declarations. Would these be for every time a product is exported or generically for one particular model?
I think you'll need an export declaration for every product, but it wouldn't necessarily need to be a different export declaration, essentially. It'd be for the consignment. But again, you know, I'm happy to actually try and get clarification on that. What I will actually say, though, is that I think that will be clarified in the border operating model document. So I'd certainly recommend all you guys actually look through that document. If post that you've still got concerns of that nature, again, flag those up to me, and I'm happy to try and get somebody from HMRC to actually pick up all your members' Q&As on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, That's the end of the questions that have been posed in the chat, unless somebody has the opportunity to quickly type. But that's all we've got from the chat options. Keith, do you have any additional questions you'd like to pose?
No, really only, Terry, is there any further input or clarity that you need from manufacturers or suppliers to feed back into the government? Is there any information back that's useful to have?
Yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, be honest, I mean, the big push across government at the moment is actually on readiness. You know, and actually trying to gauge whether our companies and traders are actually ready for these changes taking place, you know, either on the 1st of January or defer for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever it be, you know, and whether we're actually ready to actually do this. So I'm always looking for feedback, you know, and if there's feedback on the rules that have come out and saying that that's really difficult for us to actually sort of like comply with, happy to see that feedback. But at the end of the day, I think we're at the position now where these are the rules, you know, but happy to take those. But I'm really keen to get any feedback from your members and your individual, whatever, about their state of readiness, you know, for January, because our ministers are very interested, you know, and I think the trouble we have within BEIS is certainly generally there's only two people ministers listen to. That's if you're an automotive company or if you're an aerospace company. If you're making anything else, they generally haven't been interested. But I think what we need, I think as a result of this process of going through the Brexit process, going through the COVID process, going through the no deal process, I think there is a much bigger awareness, which I think is quite healthy across ministers. There is actually a much larger manufacturing community out there they need to be aware of. They're actually giving up GVA and giving up employment far greater than those air and auto guys. So I think they do need to have not just those big level type stats type responses they get. I think we need to know what subsectors actually think about this sort of stuff and their state of preparedness. So I think within subsectors, you know, as you'll know, I mean the balance of European as opposed to UK ownership of companies is very different. The balance as to global companies ownership is different. You know, a lot of the business operational models are very different. Certainly around, as I say, servitization of capital sales type goods is very different. You know, are you outsourcing your service and maintenance activity within the EU, or are EU companies outsourcing their service and maintenance activity in the UK? Is the border stuff as important? So all that type of stuff on a almost like a subsector level is the really rich data that I could really deal with, actually, Keith, from you and your members. Anything of that nature is gold dust to me. So I say I'm reporting centrally back to our ministers on electronics and machinery, but I actually want within that to actually break down and say there are different places within electronic machinery where things are impacted in very different ways. And unless I know the operational models, I can't actually try and assess, you know, how these easements or these changes are impacting different companies.
Okay, so if we put something together on a scale of 1 to 10 across some key elements, i.e. product readiness, maybe understanding of border controls, and just scale it and do a quick survey out to the members on that and feed that back in, that would be useful.
Yeah,
so,
that'd be absolutely brilliant.
Should we just
post having a look at the border operating model and post looking at the raft of documents that came out yesterday. Okay. I think that'd be incredibly useful to me, Keith, if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, we'll do that. That's fine. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Jocelyn, do we have any further questions? If not, we'll bring the call to an end.
No further questions, Keith.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining this morning, and especially a thank you to Terry, who's burnt some midnight oil in putting this together after a wet and windy week in Wales last week. So thank you very much for your time doing that for us, Terry. We very much appreciate it. All of our resources are on the Brexit Hub on the FEA website, and so you'll find all of the documentation up there. And once Terry's had managed to have his presentation checked off, we'll get that out to all of you as well. But thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you to Jocelyn for facilitating the call. And if you have any questions or comments once you've read through all the documentation, please do feed them back into me, and we'll be pleased to seek to get the answers. But thank you, everybody, for your time this morning, and especially Terry. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Terry.
Okay. Thank you.